So this is in honor of the very special bris in our shiur, in our class, and we're very excited. And for those of us that already have done it, we have our grandchildren to look forward to, so that's fine too. We have an appreciation for what was and what is and what will be. So even if it's not currently our children, we're Jews. You know, we are going to have the Brit Mila in our family, and it's nice to know what's going on. Now, of course, what's going on cannot be described in an hour. So I just highlighted some ideas. I don't even know if we'll get through them. And definitely there is more and more and more. So before I begin this class on the spirituality of the Brit Mila, of the bris, the circumcision, I want to start by saying that it's clearly written in the Talmud that a woman is considered innately circumcised, meaning whatever we're talking about that happened through the circumcision, a woman naturally acquires all of these advantages that spiritually, Kabbalistically, and legally, every Jewish woman is considered already as one who possesses all the advantages of a circumcision, just obvious to our stature. So let's discuss what the Brit does spiritually. There's a lot of different ideas. I pulled some, as I said, there are many more, but these are a few ideas that we can think about. So one idea is, why do we need this bris milah? Why do we need this Brit? And why do we have it for an 8-day-old baby who has no clue what's going on? So we are all born, and I don't have to teach you this, we know this. We're all born with the natural human instinct for self-preservation, meaning a baby is intrinsically selfish, which is sort of cute. That's okay. The fact that the baby places his needs above yours and has no problem crying and screaming as if he hasn't been fed in days, just so you can wake up and feel all these alarms going off, and then that's a baby, and that's self-preservation, and with a baby it's beautiful and adorable and we accept it. But that cute self-absorbed baby, give him time, becomes that demanding toddler. Give him time, becomes that selfish child. Give him time, becomes that self-absorbed adult. So therefore, even though it's cute in a tiny baby, but we want to right away put into place the very Jewish value of refinement, of purification, of putting self aside to a certain degree. And that's what the bris is. A bris, it means you're making a sacrifice. You're removing a foreskin, which is, bottom line, diminishing a physical intensity of pleasure of intercourse. That is definitely what's happening. So right away from the beginning, we're sacrificing a pleasure, and we're saying that serving God is more important. And that's that very strong value that we want our child to absorb before he even understands what's going on. Meaning, if God wanted us to be without a foreskin, he could have created us without a foreskin. That's not what he wanted. He wanted us to remove it ourselves. Meaning there's a self-work in removing that veil, that covering, that barrier. Kabbalistically, it says that when the foreskin is removed and it's revealing the organ beneath, what spiritually is happening is a veil is removed, the veil over our soul. And it's revealing what's really going on underneath, that intrinsic bond every single Jew has with God. This bond is universal to all Jews. The circumcision does not create the bond. The circumcision is actually different than every other commandment, because every single commandment creates bonds with Hashem. That's what happens with every single commandment. There's a bond between us and Hashem, and then we do a commandment, and there's another one. And then we do a commandment, and there's another one. And every single commandment creates new channels of relationship, except the circumcision. By the bris milah, we're not creating. We're revealing that deep intrinsic bond that every Jew has with God naturally. So the parable for this is not mine. I don't take credit for it. Is imagine a very dark room and you don't see. So you turn on a light and that works. But imagine if you could push away the thick, dark curtains over the window, and then all this natural sunlight is flooding the room. That's a much more powerful light than your electric bulb. So every mitzvah, every commandment is like another piece of electricity, another light bulb, another light bulb, another light bulb, another limited piece of light. The circumcision is removing the coverings on the window, and then all of the infinite sunlight is pouring in. That's what's accomplished by the circumcision. That's what's accomplished by the Mila. So it's actually far more powerful than any commandment we do is revealing who we are. That intrinsic bond between every single one of us and Hashem. And we all have it. As I said, for those that got on later, I want you to know this, otherwise this whole class will be wondering about this. It says in the Talmud, a woman is considered already with the spirituality of the circumcision. So everything we're talking about, and everything I didn't have time to put into this class, but I considered, we already have it naturally. So how do you express this? Any thoughts on how you express your intrinsic bond with Hashem? Anything you do just because you're a Jew and you have that bond? Or anyone have the ability to put into words how they understand their bond with Hashem, their natural bond?
I'll say something. I don't know. You just feel it. I just feel a bond. And I think the bond is strengthened every time you make a request and it's granted. So you pray for something and that prayer is answered, and then it strengthens a bond. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for.
There's no answer I'm looking for.
Okay.
We all have that bond. And it's sort of hard to put into words what it is, but we all have it. And what Yael is saying is when she turns and is responded to, that's her moment of really feeling that deep, deep connection that's there always. But now she's focusing on it and she feels it. I think
a lot of times Hashem is just good to me. Like it might be something very small, like the light doesn't turn red and I'm late. And, I'm late for an appointment and every light I hit is green. And I'm like, and I say, thank you, Hashem, for everything. Like I recognize everything, whether it's that or whether it's a big miracle or a big, Yeshua. But I'm always saying, thank you, Hashem, for everything that happens. And I recognize that it comes from him.
I think you're absolutely right. I my brain goes in that direction also. There's the green lights. There's the less traffic than should be. There's the miraculously making it on time, even though Waze said I wouldn't. Definitely up there in those small but constant hugs, embrace, feeling like I'm not alone. I'm being taken care of. And that's definitely one very strong way of feeling that bond we have with Hashem. Anyone else? Because there is no right answer. There is no wrong answer. We all have the bond. We all probably have glimmers of awareness of it, and it might be expressed very differently in each person. Anyone else has how they express their bond or feel their bond?
I have something. I just found actually a letter that I wrote apparently when I was like 8 years old to my grandparents who had died, and just said, I hope you're having fun in heaven. So I guess that innate feeling that this is like a monetary world and that things in existence are going to continue. And I guess there's just a deeper connection to, I don't know, it's just always been inside that my dad always reminded me I've had this sense of connection that ever since I was little, that this is just, there's more of a deeper spiritual connection than just the physical realm that we're in right now. I can't really put into words, but
Isn't that unbelievable?
it's a
An
feeling.
8-year-old.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by intrinsic. You don't understand it. You didn't study it. You can't conceptualize it, but you just know it. Yeah, that's it. That's a Jewish 8-year-old. Sometimes I feel like the younger, the more they get it, and we shouldn't mess them up too much, We shouldn't take away that pure reality of a child where God is so, so real. Like for a lot of adults, to access God, we have to negate world, detach from the physicality, lessen our connection. And for a child, Hashem is so there, he's just part of world, within world, within the games, within the toys, within the food, within everything of a child's life, there as a real partner of everything in the child's existence is Hashem. And I think what you're saying just so beautifully expresses that natural, not cognitive, natural, intuitive bond we all have with Hashem. A beautiful expression of it. So this bond is what's unveiled as the foreskin is removed, as the organ below is unveiled during the circumcision. And that's why for a Jewish child, for a boy, at the time of circumcision, or if unfortunately he doesn't receive a circumcision, at the time when he should receive a circumcision, there's a tremendous shift in his spiritual reality, to the degree that we're taught that the base soul, the soul has 5 parts, and the base part comes in at that moment, the moment he receives or should receive his circumcision, because that's the moment when that essence bond, not what you do, but like what you are, is uncovered. The Talmud, expressing the greatness of the Mila, says we see this from Abraham, first Jew, first person that God commanded to circumcise himself. And even though he was so great and went through 10, well, at that point he didn't have 10, he had about 9, but would go through 10 unbelievable tests. But we're told that he was not considered complete before God until he circumcised himself. And you could say, well, what was he waiting for? He could have, he did every other commandment before. Why was he waiting for this one? We said, this one was so special. This one he felt he couldn't do on his own. He was waiting for God to give him the strength to do it. For God, it's the only thing that God commanded him. Everything else he did voluntarily. Everything else he was a volunteer. The circumcision, he was a Jew. He was commanded. And he was waiting for that command, so he could serve God as a Jew and do it because God said, with God's power. And then he became complete. The Sefer HaChinuch says that the human form is complete when the foreskin is removed, as versus Rambam, Maimonides, who says, no, it's not to complete our body, it's to mend our character. And removing this, I was saying, curtails the physical drive, channels it toward a more godly purpose, to a more productive purpose. But it's what's allowing us to have that ability to control ourselves. Now, it's very interesting because the sages say there are 3 rewards for the commandment of Mila, of circumcision. 1, the divine presence, the Shekhinah, will be among us. 2, we will receive ownership of the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael. And 3, the preservation of the line of David, of course, which is the line of Mashiach. So it's interesting because you're saying, okay, so the sages are saying 3 humongous things: God among us, Israel, Mashiach, pretty big rewards. But what's the connection? God among us, we sort of get, because we just said it's removing the veil, removing those foreskin. We feel that intrinsic bond. So yeah, that sort of makes sense. Then God could be among us. But why does that lead to Israel? And why does that lead to Mashiach? And why is this tremendously significant thing happening to an 8-day-old baby who is clueless of what's going on? I mean, the Arabs do it at age 13, so to speak. We do it at 8 days. There's a reason why. So again, establishing a little bit more what we were saying before, there's 2 ways we connect to Hashem. We connect to Hashem experientially, and as we were discussing before, like with Elisa's example, with Yael's example, we connect to Hashem intrinsically. Experientially means how much I'm investing in this relationship. The greater my devotion, the greater my passion, the greater my service, the greater my love for God, the greater I want to be close to him. Well, the greater is that experiential connection. Every commandment I do is a channel for another connection. Every transgression I do severs a connection. So that experiential bond depends on me. I build it, I sever it, I'm devoted, it's very strong, I'm spaced out, it gets weaker. That's a very personal bond that very, very, very much depends on how much I'm putting into my relationship. The intrinsic bond is from God, not from us. It has nothing to do with me. If I know it, if I dedicate my life to God, if I'm oblivious that I'm a Jew, it doesn't make a difference. A Jew and God is absolutely one. Sins don't lessen that bond. Mitzvahs don't enhance that bond. Every single Jew, identically and inherently, is bound up with God. So the experiential bond is how I am creating a connection to God. The intrinsic bond is how God is connecting to me, how God creates that connection with me. Because sometimes I could terminate the relationship, but God never will. So have you ever felt this? Have you ever felt a time when you weren't spaced in, when you didn't know God, when you weren't thinking of him, but something inside of you sparked a connection? Because Hashem always keeps the relationship with us, even when we're unaware of him. Did anybody here ever have that experience? Anyone have that feeling when they were like not spaced in and not thinking and not really caring? And Hashem did something to wake them up? Hashem did something to make them feel how really they are bound up with Hashem, even though they thought they weren't?
Does this count if you're when you're a child, or more like when you're an adult?
Either.
I mean, I always felt connected, but when I was 7, my parents went to a Chabad wedding in Paris of cousins who were Baal Teshuvas, and they came back and they were like, oh, I was so religious. There was a mechitza, men on one side, women on the other side, and other women were wearing wigs. And in my mind, I said to myself, but that's how I'm going to be when I grow up. I don't know if that's like, I mean, but like I was 7, I wasn't.
That's so beautiful.
I wasn't thinking about like God all the time and spirituality, but I don't know. I did something that's
inside
always
you
stayed with
said,
me.
That's me. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a beautiful.
But I don't know if I covered my hair because I had that thought when I was 7, or was it like a foreshadowing of the future? I don't know.
I think it could be
Or
a
both.
bit of both. Meaning
Yeah,
when you're
both.
7 and your parent and your mother is saying, oh my gosh, they're all covering their hair. And you're thinking, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. That's not coming from your brain. How do you know what you're going to do? And why would you want to do that? And your mother clearly didn't do it. And maybe your aunts or your grandmother, I don't know if they
No
were
one
doing
did it.
either.
No one did back then. No one.
No one did.
No.
And
This
why
is
in the world
70s.
are you as a 7-year-old thinking that's what I'm going to do? Yeah, that is it. That is it.
I think that was my neshama talking to me.
That is it. So did that help when you were an adult and made a choice? Absolutely. Did you still have the ability to reject that? Of course. Of course. We could say, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Because that pure voice can get muffled. can get
Yeah.
covered over, but something in you sparked at age 7 to say, me too. And what I think is amazing is then you remembered it like 20 years later.
Oh, I always remembered it. Always.
Because it was a real Hashem
Always.
experience.
Yeah, I think so.
That's absolutely a perfect example. Anyone else had some? Not everyone has it, to be honest. Because some people, no, I was always connected. I always felt it. So it's not as clear. But sometimes when people feel a little less connected, then something jerks them up, like Yael's amazing example. Then it's like, yeah, that is it. That's that bond. That what didn't come from you. That came from something bigger than you, inside of you, where Hashem is saying, everybody around you can be forgetting about me. I'm not giving up on you. You're mine.
I had
You're
an
mine.
experience.
Eliza?
Yeah, I had an experience where I remember it was my attempt towards pushing the boundaries, towards, almost like moving away and knowing that it was going to be Shabbos. And I was so curious to see like what the nightlife was in Tel Aviv. And so I remember going and I was all set up to like just experience the nightlife. And there was a girl who was American, and at this point it was Erev Shabbos, and so I was staying in a youth hostel in Tel Aviv. You're talking like totally non-from place, but I still, of course, wanted to stay where it was only girls. And so I remember she looked at me, and we had just, showered, and they had these different, showers in the shower room. And she said to me, she was telling me that she came to do some army program, but the whole time that she was just peeling potatoes, and she really didn't learn anything about being in Israel or about Shabbat. And she said, but someone told her that she should buy these special breads for Shabbat and buy grape juice. Did I know anyone who could help her learn what to do with it? And I thought, you've got to be kidding.
God
And
said, you think I'm going to let you off the hook because you're in a youth hostel?
Right. And so I remember looking at her and said, yes. And I said, but that comes later. First, actually, you need to, and I'm thinking, I'm going to say this. Okay. And here, how many other times in my life am I always trying to get other people to light and to do different mitzvahs? But that particular Shabbos, I was 18 years old, and I was pushing the boundary that one time. So I thought, and I said, well, you're supposed to first light. And she said, oh, I have candles, but I don't know what to do. Will you help me? That was my big rebellion. It lasted a few minutes.
That's a very good story.
Where's that girl now?
I honestly don't know, because I stayed put and she ran off to a discotheque, and I didn't see her again. But I went to Shul and had actually a beautiful experience and met some lovely, lovely people there, and who, were from Shul in Tel Aviv, and it was beautiful. What happened to her, I wish I could tell you,
she was your messenger. She was your, everyone's Hashem's tools. Like, look at Purim. Haman was Hashem's tool. So was Mordechai, but you could be a Haman or a Mordechai. So this girl was Hashem's tool to tell Eliza, you think you're kidding? God says, you think I'm going to let you run off on a Friday night and forget about me? No way. I don't care. I'm not letting. And then Eliza's like, okay, I heard, I got it. I listened. And she did her shlichut, she did her mission. And I'm sure in the merit of that, in the merit of her helping you maintain your relationship, I'm sure someone helped her, and she also did. But that's a beautiful story. It's a perfect story. Yeah, Els was a perfect story, and Eliza's a perfect story. And they're so different, but they're both expressing that exact same point. Anyone else had such an experience where they really felt like Hashem called them? They were either like Yael, a child, and not in an environment that was expressing that, or like Eliza, someone who's saying, and Hashem said, I don't let, you're mine. Anyone else had such an experience? Where that intrinsic bond was sparked, not by you, but by Hashem.
Do you remember that story I told you? You had just finished teaching us about vegetables and even frozen vegetables.
Absolutely. Yes, I definitely do. That is a perfect story. Yes, you can share it. I definitely remember that story.
I mean, Mrs. Turn had just taught us about bugs and vegetable, even in frozen vegetables, if they don't have a hechsher on it, it's not good, whatever. So I was making vegetables with rice, and I turned for one, and I had poured water in the aluminum pan, and I turned, and I had used frozen vegetables, but not bodeg. I wasn't, and you had just finished teaching us. I was like, oh, come on, and I turned my back for a second, and the pan started leaking water everywhere. I mean, it was all over the floor. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this a sign? And I was like, let me test this pan out one more time. And I put, I'd had a pack of frozen vegetables that were bodeg, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but I put the bodeg vegetables in and with the rice and the water, and the pan was fine. It was the craziest
I
story.
totally remember that story. You've had a few stories, ma'am. That's not the only one. I can think of a few
I
other
know.
stories you've shared. But
That
yes,
came to mind.
that is a very amazing story of exactly that same point.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Turin, in your merit, since that class, I only buy bodeg frozen vegetables.
Me
Or no, I
too.
shouldn't say, and I say only. I buy more frozen bodeg vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower. I used to buy the fresh and try to wash them, and I don't do that anymore. Now I just buy the bodeg. So that's in your merit.
I don't know if
Me
it's my
too.
merit, but if it is, I'll take
Yes.
it. There's a few other
Yes.
brands, by the way. You don't have to stick to Bodek. There's a
Or
bunch
the
of
kosher ones,
the kosher
meaning,
one. There's a bunch
I'm
of
paying
Now
a
Israeli
I'm
gazillion
brands.
so
dollars for
curious.
broccoli.
Is
What?
this a recent class? I'm so curious about all
No,
this.
it was like
It was
2 years ago, 3 years ago.
class.
Yeah,
Oh,
pre-COVID for sure.
okay.
Pre-COVID, in person. And yes, Miriam shared, I think it was the next week, she shared that story. It was unbelievable. And she has shared a few other stories. I think actually Miriam has a number of stories that she shared that really expressed, but again, it's a perfect example. And what I love is Miriam's story is so different from Eliza's, is so different from Yael's, but every story shows that exact same point. Exact same point. God is saying, you make your bonds. I have mine. I'm not giving up mine. And I'm showing you it, like it or not, you're mine. That's thank God. That's what we have. A very, very, very special gift of that intrinsic bond. And every time we get that flash, it's sort of like Miriam said. So after that, she, on her own is like, she heard it. I got it. I got the message. I understand. Show me bodek. Show me belief. Show me began. I'm in. I get it. I get it. I hear her. You're right. I also want the relationship. Basi, did you have something you want to share?
I'll just share the abridged version. I didn't hear the whole beginning of the share. Sorry, I missed it.
We're saying how the circumcision is really God's way of uncovering the essence bond, his end of the relationship, as versus our end that we create by how we serve him, how we enhance it, or how we don't serve it and mess it up. But whatever we do or don't do, that essence bond with God is beyond and has nothing to do with any of it. And so I was asking people to share experiences they've had when they felt that essence, they're God's, like it or not, know it or not, there's that essence bond between us and Hashem.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I have a lot of those stories, but one that always comes to mind is my husband's, we moved to America. My husband's business was doing really, really well. And I started not covering my hair so much. He started not being so strict about learning and davening and whatever. And his business mamish went in the toilet, and we had to sell our house, and we had to move. And the house that we happened to rent was on the other side of town. It was in a much more yeshivish area. And my husband became really close with this really big Rav, and he started learning and going to it was just so, it was kind of makes me emotional, because it's so crazy. It's Hashem's I want you near me. I want you to be close to me. If you're not going to do the right things, then I'm taking away from you. And it was so
And that's
obvious,
my
like,
gift. That's my gift that I'm taking it away from you.
it was such a gift. It was such a gift. Such a
That is,
gift.
that is, wow. The beauty is that you see it that way, because another person could say, yeah, I mean, it was good, but you know, the other house was really nice. And it's nice that you're like, no, that wasn't for us. We couldn't handle that challenge. It wasn't good for us. It wasn't good for us spiritually, which means it wouldn't have been good for us physically, and it wouldn't have been good for our kids, and it wouldn't have been good for our marriage, and it wouldn't have been good for any other aspect of our life. So thank you, Hashem, for removing it before everything else fell apart.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And again, and I'm just reminding because I think it's so beautiful. Like, you know, the colors of the rainbow, the orchard with all the different flowers. Yael, that 7-year-old with that epiphany thought. Eliza, the 18-year-old testing the limits. Miriam, Basi. We have it. We all have that bond where God says, whatever you think, I'm never giving you up. You're mine. We're one. And, you know, you could try, but I'm pulling you back because I want you to be close to me. And that's, you know, I think maybe all these stories are sparking people to remember their time, you know, their relationship when, oh yeah, that happened to me too. Maybe exactly not like Yael, but sort of, or Lisa's, or sort of, or Miriam's, or Bossy's, because we all have it. But it's beautiful, and I love that everyone was able to naturally remember a time when they really felt Hashem was saying, "We're in a relationship. You might be unaware, but we're in a relationship." And this intrinsic bond is reflected in the bris, in the Brit, in the circumcision. Because here you have this baby who's completely oblivious. He's 8 days old. We're not giving him any more credit than an 8-day-old baby. He's completely oblivious. And it's sort of expressing that idea. Our cognizance, our understanding, our depth, that's irrelevant. That has nothing to do with it. And that's why this bond creates this manifestation of Hashem. That's what our Chachamim say. The bond got 3 rewards for the Mila, for the circumcision. And the first one is God being manifest, the manifestation of Hashem in our lives, in our world, in the world, because that's exactly what's happening. As we do the Mila, as this intrinsic bond is uncovered, God can be revealed in our lives and in the world. So that makes so much sense. As I said, that is when your base soul, the first part of your soul, enters your body. We women get it earlier because for a woman, that first part of soul comes in by the age when we should get our Jewish name. If you do or don't is irrelevant, which means either the first Monday, Thursday, or Shabbos after you're born. For a boy, you know, that's why we have a head start in the spirituality. For a boy, it's on the 8th day, because that's when his intrinsic bond is uncovered. Also, we get our third part of our soul a year in advance, because we get it by the Bat Mitzvah when we're 12, and the boy gets it by the Bar Mitzvah when he's 13. So there are reasons for our enhanced spirituality. But this is what happens by the circumcision. But why the other two beautiful, beautiful, amazing gifts, rewards, consequences from the circumcision? The land of Israel and the line of David, which means in essence Mashiach.
Before we move on to those
Sure.
two, I have a question.
Sure.
So what about when a bris has to be delayed? Does that mean that there's a delay also in those elements of the neshama?
Yes. Now, sometimes if the circumcision has to be very delayed, like sometimes for months, there's a concept of maybe at that point, the child already should receive his Jewish name. I was in close contact with a woman who her baby's circumcision was delayed for many months. And I really advised her, obviously in consultation with the Rav, to already give the Jewish name. But which sometimes people do, they don't share it with other people, but they just do for the spiritual benefits. But yes, there is a delay. 100% there's a delay, but that's God's call. You got to, that's his script. And that's why I'm saying a Jewish woman has this advantage over Jewish women over Jewish men, because by a Jewish woman that could never be. Obviously, it never takes 8 days, and it's a day or two at the most, and there's no concept of a delay. And for a man, yes, there definitely could be.
Does that mean then that a boy who's born from a family where there are older siblings, where they realize that there's, let's say, hemophilia within the family, that he never receives those other aspects of his neshama?
No. So we would say at that point, the same way that he would never receive a Jewish name, he would receive a Jewish name based on, again, whatever the rabbis would say really would be the time of his circumcision, when he should. But for a person that is in that situation, it's a spiritually very difficult situation. It's not simple. It's not like, okay, well, no, it's spiritually very significant. But again, that's what the rabbis are determining, then that's exactly the right thing for this soul, for this journey. But it's not a simple journey. But for someone who it is delayed extensively, sometimes you speak to the rabbi, is there a point now at this, is it possible at this point to already give the Jewish name, which also is very linked to drawing that soul in, if we can't do the circumcision? Sorry, anyone else have questions? I would sort of moving forward without really pausing. Any other questions on any of this? So why does it lead to Eretz Yisrael? Why does the circumcision tie into the land of Israel? So we said that there's two aspects of our relationship. There's the intrinsic, there's God calling our name, as all those stories demonstrated. And there's the experiential, us moving to God, us serving him, us saying, we want you too, and we love you, and we want to serve you, and we're choosing to be one with you. And all of that is tremendously strengthened when the Jew is in Israel. So we're told that when Hashem sees that we're choosing his connection with us, which is a circumcision, he's going to help us strengthen our connection to him by giving us Eretz Yisrael. Because when we're in the land of Israel, it helps us strengthen our bond. It helps us serve him more. And again, I'm assuming some people here have definitely felt it. A close friend of mine passed away this year. Liba Bunin, I remember her telling me she was in Israel. She was visiting, but for a while, for a few weeks. And she said when she left and she came to her stopover in Europe, she looked around and she said, everyone's here like the Walking Dead, because they're alive. And here it's such a less life. She felt like Walking Dead. When she came back to Chicago, I think she got used to it. But that first, wait, I've been in Israel for a few weeks. Now I'm somewhere else. This isn't alive. That's really the Jew in Israel. It really is. I remember my husband saying, we were there a few years ago for my son's wedding, and he said, even the most simple, common person there's a different flavor. There's a flavor of a Jew being in Israel. So when we're in Israel, we're more spiritually open to God. We're more spiritually open to inspiration. Our sages say the Torah can only be fully appreciated in the land of Israel. Many commandments can only be done in the land of Israel. So through the Mila, through us allowing Hashem to express that intrinsic bond that he's giving us, he gives us the land of Israel to allow us to have expression of our bond with him. People here have felt it. You could just raise your virtual hand, or if you'd like to share that when you've been in Israel and have really felt different in your connection to Hashem. Miriam, Dina, anyone else has felt it? Like when you're there, it just, Hashem feels more real, and you want Yael also. And Shira, you just want to heavy. Wow, look how many people. It's just, it really is there. It's like palpable. You know, maybe it's more palpable if you live in Chicago and go there. Maybe when you're there, you sort of get used to that higher level existence, so you forget. Eliza also, but there's something, a Jew being in Eretz Yisrael, not just being in a Jewish land where, you know, the bars are also full of Jews. No, being in Eretz Yisrael, being in a place where God, what does Eretz Yisrael mean? The land that wants to do the will of God. Put a Jew in that piece of territory, and like it opens up my end of the deal, my moving to have a connection to Hashem. So that is why we're told that the circumcision, allowing God's bond with us to be expressed, causes him to give us the land of Israel. So our end, us choosing to have a relationship with him, gets so strengthened. What about the third promise, the line of David? Well, from the line of David is the Mashiach. And through Mashiach, we merge these two bonds. There's Hashem's bond, there's our bond, but ultimately it's supposed to be one bond. The intrinsic and the experiential are supposed to merge as one. And that's what's going to happen with Mashiach, that we're going to merit to have an experiential bond with God himself. His end and our end will be so fused, it's going to be one entity. So since the circumcision, the Brit, strengthens the intrinsic bond, which then allows us to strengthen our bond, the experiential bond, what we are creating by our desire to be one with him, we become deserving of preserving the line of David, of having Mashiach, and of fusing these two bonds together. And again, for a woman, this all is natural. This all is as we're born, even beyond this. Now, the end of the Parsha of Lech Lecha, when Avraham, at age 99, performs the circumcision, as a result, we move to Parshas Vayera. What happened to Parshas Vayera? Vayera Lov Havaya. God appears to Avraham in a way he never had before. And we're told there was a twofold difference in how Hashem was able to relate to Avraham after the circumcision. One, it was the highest level of God that was never before able to talk to Abraham. Abraham was 99. God's been talking to him for the past 96 years, but not on that level. That level was only possible after the bris. And Abraham was able to absorb that energy more than he ever had before. So both it was a higher level of Hashem, because such a level God could never have shared with Abraham. It would have been like too much for him to handle. He could no way have absorbed it. And not only did he absorb it, but he took it in deeper to his very body in a way he never was able to before. And the Bible explains it's because the circumcision is higher than any other commandment. And we said before the circumcision is completely different because every other commandment creates new bonds, and the circumcision uncovers the essence bond of what's a Jew and what's God and what's that point of oneness. But the sages explain that every commandment is a threefold bond, and the bris, the circumcision, is a 13-fold bond. So every mitzvah has a threefold bond, except the circumcision. It has 13 bonds. So that's expressing the fact that it's 13 times expressed as a covenant. It's a 13-fold covenant, shows how high it is. And at the same time, and actually because it's so high, it goes all the way down. Like the best teachers should teach the weakest students. the strongest therapist should should help the most limited, needy children. So this bond, this commandment, this 13-fold bond goes all the way down as no other commandment can do, and impacts the very flesh. It's the only mitzvah that does that. The only mitzvah that literally is marked on the very physical flesh. Aliza.
Does the 13 have anything to do with the bar mitzvah age also?
It definitely does. It definitely does. It definitely would be like the precursor of it. And we were talking before about the idea of the soul entering the body. So I sort of alluded to that, but very briefly. For a boy by his circumcision, or when he should have a circumcision. And for a girl by when she receives her Jewish name, or when she should receive her Jewish name, that's when the first part of the soul enters the body. The second part enters when there should be the beginning of their education, of their cognitive awareness of Hashem, which for most children we would put at about age 3, some say 4 or 5, it's sort of a little bit of a, when exactly is that moment, but some even has put it as early as 3. And the third level is the bar or bat mitzvah. 13-year-old boy, 13 bonds of the circumcision. Now we have the third level of soul entering. And for the girl, as I said, we women are spiritually so much more tuned in. We get it literally a year earlier. That's not a slight difference. There's a year head start of every Jewish woman over every Jewish man, because the woman gets it at 12, the man gets it at 13. So why does there have to be this pain? Why couldn't God can do anything. So why do you think God took this commandment, which is so powerful, impacting our very flesh, and made it painful? Any thoughts?
I think it's easy to do things that make you feel good. It's very easy to go ahead and say, yeah, I'm in. But when something's painful and you're saying, it's kind of giving your utmost 100%, saying I'm in, not just halfway. You're completely in and trusting of what, it's about.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? I totally hear what Elisa's saying, sort of echoing in a sense what I was thinking. Anyone else? Why do you think everything we're saying, we're not done, but we'll try to finish on time, but everything we're saying, why do you think, God can do anything. Why did he choose to do something that's so important, so spiritual, uncovering the intrinsic bond that we've merited to feel as well, glimmers of? Why does it be painful for the child? So it very much resonates with me what Elisa's saying, but does anyone have any other thoughts on that? We're mothers. Some of us are mothers of boys. Some of us have had our babies go through this. Any thoughts on why it has to be something that also has physical pain?
Is it possibly healing for us as the moms? Are we supposed to be the ones feeling the pain?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think for us as mothers, we should try to stay above and stay focused on what is really happening to the child at this moment and rejoicing in what's happening.
I think it's so cruel.
So any
physical, not spiritual.
But any thoughts? Why? God could do it without that. Why is he doing it in a way that does give pain? Say it's short-lived pain. The child gets enough wine in his system, it doesn't really bother him. But why any pain at all?
No clue. I'm ready for the answer.
Well, the answer I would think of, and which is very much in line with what Elisa was saying, is I think it expresses the price tag. Things of value come at cost. And it's a very foundational lesson that's imprinted in our flesh, imprinted experientially before we have a cognizance of it. Meaning before we understand, we already are absorbing a certain message about being a Jew and having a relationship with Hashem. And there's a price tag. There is a cost. And it's so worth it. And so many times, personally, I'm sure we've all had that moment of like sticking with Hashem despite the price tag. And obviously as a people, that's how we've survived. We've survived by saying we're putting our relationship with Hashem first. And yes, there's price tags for our relationship. And it's worth it. And we're so blessed. You know, sometimes I know people feel or think of Judaism as like what I call a feel-good religion, because there's so many parts that work for us and that we love. Now, everyone could be different in terms of what those parts are. Some people love Shabbos, like me. Oh my gosh, it's the best day of my week. I always wish it was longer. Many people love the holidays and the joy and family and connection. Some people love shul, love davening, stimulated by Torah study. I mean, there's so many parts of religion that are so enriching and we really appreciate them. And there also has to be a part that is just because this is God's will. And everyone has to have some part of religion that they just do because God, this is what you want. I'm in. I'm yours. As was demonstrated by many of the stories, many of the personal vignettes, when we forget, he reminds us, but we have a choice. That's what I said. It's a twofold bond. It's him saying, you're mine. And it's us saying, yes, I want to be yours. And I want to be yours is in every situation, including the situations where it might seem easier not to be. I mean, we're coming from Purim. And as I believe we mentioned last week when we were discussing Purim, 2 weeks ago, that they could have chosen differently. They could have become idolaters, and then they wouldn't have been considered Jews, and then the decree wouldn't be on them. And not one Jew in the entire world went that road. You could say, well, not for me, but for my spouse, for my children. Why should they die just because we're Jewish? And not one Jew did that. Every Jew said, God, I'm in. God, I'm in. So there is that. And I think it's very much embedded in our psyche in that moment before we're old enough to understand. So wait, just 1 second. Question. So someone asked, so if that's what it is, why don't we allow the child to choose? Well, why are we like just putting it on the child? But that's the whole idea of the circumcision. And I said the contrast point between, Judaism and the Arab version of the story, that when Avram circumcised himself at age 99, he circumcised Ishmael, who was 13. And from that, there's many Arabs that at 13 go through circumcision. And we do it when we're 8 days old. And a person could say, well, 13, that makes so much sense. Then you're a man according to Jewish law. Then you're going to choose and it's cognitive. And the whole point is, no, we don't want any of that. We don't want, that's sort of a basic foundational understanding of the difference between Yishmael's bris and Yitzchak's. Yishmael's bris, you could say, was better. He chose. He was a 13-year-old. He could have told his father, no way, you're not doing that to me. And he didn't. And that's considered a virtue that he didn't. What's Yitzchak's virtue? He was a baby. Nobody asked his opinion. How could anyone ask his opinion? How could he voice an opinion? So we could say, well, Yishmael's was better. God says, no, Yitzchak's is better. You're my kids, 8 days, not 13. Why? Because 13 implies a relationship created by understanding and therefore limited to understanding. 8 days implies a relationship that has nothing to do with understanding and therefore not limited to understanding, which was the whole idea of Yitzchak's reality. Yitzchak was a miracle child, nothing to do with what man could produce. That's the life of a Jew. We're miracle people. Our existence makes no sense. If you think it makes a little sense, learn some Jewish history. The more you learn Jewish history, the more you will know in a completely secular, sociological way, the existence of Jews makes no sense. I mean, our physical existence, and how much more so our spiritual existence. I remember once reading a book, I think maybe I might have shared this, like a Jew, of course, wrote it, a sociological study of America, the melting pot, and Jews in the melting pot. And this person was obviously not religious at all at any level. It was a very, very boring book. I just didn't get through it. But all the way at the end, I read books by opening and closing. At the very end, like the second to last page of this whole thick, boring book, this sociologist concedes. He says, it doesn't make sense. Jews don't melt. Everyone else melted. The Irish melted, the Spanish melted. The Jews didn't melt. He said, there's something about the Jew. He didn't say it's a soul. He said, but there's something about a Jew that he's different than every other race, because Jews don't melt. So the fact that we don't melt, the fact that we don't become submerged in the greater population, the fact that we've continued our existence is because we're 8-day-old circumcisions, not 13-year-old circumcisions, because it's something much bigger than us, much bigger than our cognition, much bigger than our understanding, much bigger than our choice. That's the whole point we're saying here. God says, you're mine. I love you and I want you and you're mine. And all those stories everyone shared, and they were all so beautiful. And it was so amazing how, like, it was so natural for everyone to remember times when Hashem reminded them that you can give up on me, I'm never giving up on you. And every time we have that, or we remember that, it pulls something in our heart and we're like, I wanted to, I'm in. And that's actually what happened Purim. I'm going back to Purim, because 1,000 years before, God said, you're my people, and he gave us the Torah. And of course we said, yes, 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 Nasa v'nishma. But our sages say there wasn't much choice in the matter. God so much exposed his love for us. What are you going to say? No. But 1,000 years later, in the story of Purim, when God was not revealed at all, and we said, we want you, we're in, we're yours, that's when we finally really got the Torah. And that's an 8-day-old bris and not a 13-year-old bris. Someone asked another question of Zipporah and giving her son the bris. And yes, that's also very reminiscent of the same idea. It's the same concept of, like, I'm not going to the whole story now, because it's a little late. Just want to finish this point. But Moshe made a calculated reason not to circumcise his son. It wasn't because he was flaking out on God's commands. There was a reason, and then we're traveling and I've got to go save the Jewish people. And then because they stopped at that inn shortly before Egypt, God said, what are you talking about? Don't make such calculations. Don't make such calculations. A bris is exactly about not making calculations. It's exactly about something much bigger than human cognition. It's about a bond that defies calculations. And that's the bond of the Jews with God. And that bond's literally how we still exist. Sociologically, it makes no sense. With all the waves that have tried to destroy us, it makes no sense. And yet we still are here and strong, flourishing as a people, and as a people that are so connected to God. You know, when Moshe, before he passed away, he was showed all the generations until the redemption. And it says when he saw the last generation, that's us, that's what all the rabbis say, when he saw that last generation, he couldn't believe it. He said, the world is so dark. There's so much evil. There's so much concealment. And these Jews are still serving God. And that humbled him. We humbled Moshe. We, not some great people that lived 1,000 years ago or great people that lived 150 years ago or the pure people in the Shtetlach of Europe. No, us not so pure, not so great, not such holy people living in a completely secular America. We humbled Moshe because we're still hanging on despite all that. And that's what made Moshe the most humble man that ever lived. Our relationship to Hashem. And that's the bris. That's that bond that makes no sense, but it's what's kept the Jewish people alive as a people and as one so connected to Hashem from Avraham until now, and what's bringing us to Mashiach. So this is the idea that it's so high and it can go all the way into our physical flesh. It could go all the way into taking a piece of real estate and making it Eretz Yisrael. That's what happens. So we're going to stop now because I didn't want to keep people over, but it's a thought, as I wrote in the blurb, it's an appreciation for what happens at circumcision at a Mila. If you're in that position to have children now, if you, God willing, are soon going to be in that position to have children, if you're going to be in the position to enjoy your grandchildren's, or just thinking and reflecting on what it means to be a Jew. And what it means for us and how each one of us really have the relationship of what I reach out and create and the relationship that's so much bigger than me, where God holds me so tight, like it or not, he says, you are mine. And we say, yes, we're grateful. We are. So Shira, we want to wish you Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. We're so happy for you. We're all so happy for you.
Thank you so much.
So
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
feel your
Wish
joy,
me luck tomorrow and I'm crying.
feel your blessings,
It's gonna be amazing.
feel your blessings, and you can stay focused on what's really going on and appreciate that your child, from the beginning, he's getting it absolutely right. And that neshama is entering him at that moment. And you're so blessed. So blessed.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
And we all really are.
Thanks, everyone.
We all really are, because there's 15 million Jews in the world. Forget there's 8 billion mankind. So we're blessed. We're part of the 15 million Jews. But of the 15 million Jews, are 3 million religions? And God chose us to say, no, I'm putting you in that group. We're very, very, very blessed. Thank you so much for joining. We should feel the blessings. We really should feel the blessings and celebrate that we have this relationship. Thank you so much for joining.
Amen. Thank you so much, Ms. Tern.